Picture this. One woman stands in her backyard holding a paper bag. Inside are leftover seeds from last season, half-empty packets of lettuce, carrots, radishes, beans, tomatoes, herbs, even some flowers. Instead of organizing them into neat rows like the gardening books say, she reaches in, grabs a handful of mixed seeds, and scatters them across bare soil like she is feeding chickens. 3 months later, her 2-meter plot produces 30 kilograms of vegetables. Her neighbor, who followed every spacing chart and planting schedule, harvests 10 kilograms from the same size space. When she posts photos online, gardening experts flood the comments. This is reckless. This will fail. This is not how you grow food. But her garden does not care what the experts think. It just keeps producing. We have all been told that successful gardens require careful planning. But what if we traded a spreadsheet for a handful of mixed seeds? Here is why the science behind chaos gardening and the industry that buried it could change everything you think you know about growing food. The method did not start on TikTok. It started in cottage gardens across Europe, where farmers had no choice but to make every seed count. Walk through a 19th century cottage garden in rural England, and you would see purple cabbages pushing up between orange calendulas, green bean vines winding through tomato cages, and carrots with their feathery tops sprouting next to low-growing thyme. The air would smell like basil and marigolds mixed with the earthy scent of wet soil. These were not showpiece gardens. They were survival plots for families who depended on every potato, every onion, every handful of peas. Seeds that fell from last season's harvest mixed with new plantings, creating combinations no one had planned. Grandmothers saved seeds in jars labeled with pencil marks, mixed them together on planting day, and scattered handfuls across prepared beds. A neighbor might trade cabbage seeds for bean seeds, and those would get mixed in too. By summer, the plots were thick jungles of green, where you could barely see the soil beneath. These gardens produced more food per square foot than the formal plots of wealthy estates where gardeners followed strict plans. The dense planting shaded out weeds, confused pests that relied on finding rows of their favorite food, and kept soil healthier year after year because different roots pulled nutrients from different depths. But as agriculture scaled up in the 1950s, everything changed. Gardening became a science of isolation. One crop per bed, precise spacing measured with rulers, specific fertilizer schedules written on calendars. Agricultural colleges taught a new gospel: control every variable, separate every species, buy new seeds each season instead of saving your own. The idea that you could scatter mixed seeds and let nature sort it out was labeled folklore. Garden magazines stopped publishing cottage layouts and shifted photography to showcase pristine rows of single crops. Seed companies printed catalogs with warnings about proper spacing and the dangers of mixing incompatible plants. The handful method was dismissed as chaotic and unprofessional. For decades, it survived only among stubborn homesteaders who never read magazines or followed rules. They just kept scattering seeds and harvesting more food than their neighbors. Then social media brought it back in a way that could not be ignored, and suddenly the old questions returned. If this method works so well, why did experts try so hard to bury it? The science is pure ecology, and modern research proves exactly why mixed seeds outperform neat rows. When you plant a single crop in rows, you create what ecologists call a monoculture, one species dominating a space with nothing to interrupt its pattern. Pests that love that plant get a clear runway to explode in population. A cabbage moth can smell a cabbage field from hundreds of meters away. She flies in, lays 500 eggs on the undersides of leaves, and within weeks, you have thousands of caterpillars destroying your crop. Diseases spread faster because every plant is the same genetic clone touching the same neighbors, creating highways for fungal spores and bacteria to travel. The soil chemistry tilts heavily toward whatever that one crop demands, depleting specific nutrients while leaving others unused. After a few seasons of growing only tomatoes in one bed, you have tomato-sick soil that grows worse tomatoes each year. But when you scatter mixed seeds, the entire dynamic shifts. Insects that hunt by scent encounter what scientists call olfactory confusion. That cabbage moth expects to find a field with a distinct sulfur smell. Instead, she encounters a tangle of basil, releasing aromatic oils, onions giving off sharp compounds that mask the cabbage, marigolds emitting pyrethrins that repel her, and beans that smell nothing like her target. Studies from agricultural universities show pest populations drop 40 to 60% in polyculture gardens compared to monoculture rows. The pests cannot find their food source efficiently. They lay fewer eggs, more get eaten by predators while searching. The whole system breaks down in the gardener's favor. Diseases face an even harder time. Fungal spores and bacteria spread through direct contact, riding on water droplets that splash from leaf to leaf or traveling through root-to-root connections in the soil. In a chaos garden, that contact is interrupted by species barriers. A tomato surrounded by unrelated species cannot share its late blight pathogen with neighbors because basil and carrots nearby are immune to tomato diseases. The infection stops at the first plant. In a monoculture tomato row, late blight can destroy 30 plants in a week. In a chaos garden, it kills one tomato and has nowhere to go. Soil benefits through a process called niche differentiation. Shallow-rooted lettuce with roots only 15 centimeters deep does not compete with deep-rooted carrots, whose taproots reach down 60 centimeters. They pull nutrients and water from completely different layers. Nitrogen-fixing beans host bacteria in their root nodules that convert atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. When those roots die and decay, that nitrogen becomes available to nearby plants, replacing bagged fertilizer entirely. The roots create a three-dimensional web of tunnels at different depths, improving drainage and aeration far better than any single crop with uniform root structure. Research from soil science labs shows mixed plantings support richer microbial ecosystems with more species diversity. More mycorrhizal fungi mean better phosphorus uptake. More bacterial diversity means stronger disease suppression and faster nutrient cycling. It is a self-reinforcing loop that only works when diversity is built in from day one. Ecologists have known for decades that biodiversity equals resilience across every ecosystem on Earth, from coral reefs to rainforests. But that knowledge stayed locked in academic journals, while garden magazines sold a completely different story. Order is better. Planning is smarter. Chaos is for amateurs. By the 1980s, the gardening industry had become a profit machine worth billions. The entire system was built on one fundamental rule. Gardeners need constant guidance, and guidance costs money. Chaos gardening threatened that business model at its core. It required no spacing charts, no crop-specific fertilizers, no pest control products, and no expert advice beyond scatter seeds and water them. A method relying on leftover packets and natural plant interactions does not generate recurring revenue. Garden centers profit from selling individual varieties, each with companion products: tomato cages, tomato fertilizer, tomato disease spray, tomato-specific soil amendments. A chaos garden could start with odds and ends already sitting in a kitchen drawer. The suppression was not conspiracy, just economics. Agricultural extension offices began warning that mixed plantings would cause competition and crop failure. Garden writers dismissed cottage-style planting as old-fashioned and irresponsible advice that would lead beginners to waste money. The message was repeated everywhere. If you want success, follow our rules. And those rules required products, planning guides, and ongoing purchases. The handful method was actively discouraged because it made the entire industry unnecessary for basic food production. Then came 2020. As millions turned to gardening during lockdowns, someone posted a TikTok video of a chaos garden. No rows, no plan, just mixed seeds thrown into a raised bed. The results were stunning. Lettuce, radishes, beans, and flowers thriving together in a dense, weed-free tangle. The video exploded to millions of views. Suddenly, the buried method was everywhere. Gardeners across every continent shared their own experiments. Photos of abundant harvests from tiny balconies. Time-lapse videos showing how fast chaos gardens filled in, choking out weeds and producing food in half the time. Comment sections exploded with one question repeated thousands of times. Why had no one taught this before? The industry response was swift. Some influencers with sponsorships called it a dangerous fad that would set beginners up for failure. Others warned that beginners would lose entire harvests to competition and disease. A few accused the trend of promoting practices that would harm soil or waste precious seeds. But photos and videos kept flooding in. Real results from real gardens. People who had never grown food were harvesting pounds of produce from spaces smaller than a dining table, using nothing but mixed seeds and dirt. The evidence piled up faster than experts could dismiss it, and this time it was too visible to ignore. Modern research backs up exactly what cottage gardeners knew. A 2019 University of California study tested polyculture vegetable plots against traditional monoculture rows across 2 growing seasons. The mixed plantings produced 30% more total biomass, used water 40% more efficiently because the dense canopy reduced evaporation and required half the pest management interventions. Plant health scores were consistently higher. In France, agronomists tracked chaos gardens over 3 full seasons in both urban and rural settings. Soil organic matter increased 15% in mixed plots compared to single crop beds, and earthworm populations nearly doubled, indicating healthier soil food webs. In China, researchers at the Institute of Urban Agriculture planted high-diversity vegetable systems in urban plots across 5 cities. Yields per square meter were 40% higher than conventional row layouts, using identical soil and water inputs. The plots required 0 synthetic fertilizers because plants pulled nutrients from different layers and recycled them through leaf litter and root decay. Even commercial farms took notice. Permaculture operations in Australia and the United States now use controlled chaos as standard practice. One Oregon farm reported chaos plots outperformed organized rows by 20% in total harvest weight, with dramatically fewer pest issues. When plants interact naturally instead of being isolated, they simply do better. Tall plants provide afternoon shade for heat-sensitive shorter ones. Deep roots bring up minerals from subsoil for shallow feeders. Flowers attract pollinators and predatory insects that control pest populations without sprays. Not every handful works equally well, and that is where the method requires knowledge rather than planning. Fast-growing crops like lettuce, radishes, arugula, and spinach pair beautifully with slower plants like tomatoes, peppers, and brassicas. The quick growers fill space early. By the time larger plants need room to expand, fast crops have already been harvested. Beans and peas are the backbone because their root nodules host bacteria that fix nitrogen. When roots decompose, that nitrogen feeds nearby heavy feeders like squash or corn. Flowers are not decoration, but functional workhorses. Marigolds release alpha-terthienol from their roots, a compound that kills soil nematodes. Nasturtiums act as trap crops, attracting aphids away from vegetables. Calendula attracts hoverflies whose larvae devour aphids by the hundreds. Herbs like basil, cilantro, and dill create scent confusion with their volatile oils. Root crops grow entirely underground, leaving surface space for leafy greens. The vertical stacking means harvesting 2 or 3 times the food from the same footprint. The most common mistake beginners make is overthinking the handful. They research perfect companion pairings or follow complex charts. The entire point is to scatter seeds, let them compete naturally, and see what thrives. Some plants will dominate, others will fail. That is the system self-selecting for what works in your exact conditions. Your chaos garden teaches you what grows well without expensive soil tests. Another mistake is planting too sparsely because it looks more organized. Chaos gardens rely on dense planting to outcompete weeds and create protective microclimates. If you leave gaps, weeds invade, and soil dries out. Aim for a thick, overlapping canopy. Timing matters more than people realize. If you scatter your entire handful on the same day, everything germinates simultaneously and fights for light. The weak die, and you lose half your planting. Instead, stagger your handfuls across time. Throw one in early spring when soil warms to 10 degrees Celsius, another in late spring after last frost, a third in early summer. The waves of growth at different stages create balance where plants support each other. Finally, do not expect picture-perfect results. A chaos garden will look messy, crowded, and wild. That is the point. The beauty is in the abundance, not the order. Here is exactly how to start your own chaos garden. Choose a space at least 1 meter by 1 meter. Smaller plots do not give plants enough room to create beneficial interactions. A 2 meter by 2 meter plot is ideal and can feed 2 people in salads alone. Loosen soil with a garden fork down to 15 centimeters deep, breaking up any compacted layers. Skip fertilizer unless your soil is severely depleted, in which case add 1 thin layer of finished compost. The plants will build fertility themselves through root exudates and natural nutrient cycling. Gather your handful. Use leftover packets from previous seasons, buy a bulk mix or trade with neighbors. Include at least 1 nitrogen fixer, a few fast-growing leafy greens, some root crops, 1 climbing plant, and a generous amount of flowers. Do not measure ratios. Just grab handfuls that feel roughly balanced. Scatter the seeds across the plot exactly like feeding birds. Do not plant in rows. Do not space them out. Just throw them with a sweeping motion to distribute evenly. Cover lightly with soil, about half a centimeter deep. Water gently but thoroughly with a hose on shower setting or a watering can with a rose attachment. Soak the soil until water pools slightly. Keep it consistently moist until germination, usually 1 to 2 weeks depending on species and temperature. Check daily and water when the top centimeter feels dry. Once plants are up, water only when soil feels dry several centimeters down. Pull obvious weeds like dandelions during the first 3 weeks while plants establish. After that, the chaos plants will have claimed every inch and nothing else can get a foothold. Harvest constantly. Pick lettuce and greens as soon as leaves are big enough to eat, even if plants are only 10 centimeters tall. Pull radishes when they bulge. Snip herbs before they flower. The constant harvesting creates gaps that other plants immediately fill, keeping the cycle going. Do not wait for everything to get huge. By mid-season, your plot will look like an overgrown jungle. That is complete success. The more chaotic it looks, the better it is working. One Michigan gardener planted a 2-meter plot with 15 seed types. By August, she harvested over 30 kilograms of vegetables, plus herbs and flowers for a market stand. Her input was 1 afternoon scattering seeds and 10 minutes of watering per week. No weeding, no fertilizer, no pest control. Today, the global seed industry is worth over $60 billion annually. Catalogs push precision. Shows sell complexity. But as more people discover that mixed seeds in 1 handful outperform spreadsheets and shelves of products, the old questions return. Why did this method disappear from every mainstream gardening book published after 1960? Why do certified experts still warn against it when peer-reviewed science proves it works better? An industry built on selling solutions every season does not profit from a method requiring 1 handful and nothing else. Chaos gardening thrives on disorder, diversity, and doing less. It turns complete novices into successful food growers without expert consultations, specialty products, or follow-up purchases. For anyone willing to try, the experiment costs less than one restaurant meal and could completely rewrite what you thought was possible. The harvest of the future depends on what we are willing to unlearn and what we are brave enough to scatter. What would you grow if planning was not required and one handful was enough?